Hello, RO Best Girl Nation. Welcome back to another episode of Intermediate Fan Reviews. Today is very special because we have parts 1 and 1.5 of Corposant out. And in the story, this marks a pretty important shift. Maybe not shift, but a big development in what's been going on. Because we've had this idea that we are delivering Helena to Nomfa and getting her there so they can do their thing or whatever, delivering Helena to Kalina. And it feels like we've been at that for an extremely long time now. And I almost forgot that that was one of our big goals, one of our big objectives. And before I start recapping things, I just want to give my general thoughts. I don't know, to anyone that hasn't read it or something like that and is just wondering how peak it is, that's what everyone's wondering. Is it peak or is it slop? And I mean, as far as Girls Frontline 2 goes so far, this is literally peak. It is some of the best that we've gotten so far. Um, I think that there was a lot of good stuff in Deep Oblivion and Aphelion, but Aphelion I feel dragged a little bit towards the end, and Deep Oblivion, while good, just wasn't this good, which is saying something because I really did like Deep Oblivion. I love that event, and this is so far. This is just so good. It feels like we're back, and not just because of returning characters, but there are also those, and I will get into that in a second. But generally, yeah, awesome stuff. But to get into kind of what happened, I'm not going to give like a full um, comprehensive summary here. I'm just going to kind of go bit by bit, interject where I feel like I need to or I want to bring something up. So, yes, we have our big objective of delivering Helena to Kalina and Lviv. This delivery has been one of our biggest objectives for a while now, and finally we get to do it. And of course, it doesn't go too great. The delivery is halted by a Girard force led by a third gen doll named Igla, who I believe we will be seeing predominantly just for this event. I would assume that she'll be one of those forces that kind of just lasts for this, and then by the end, who knows? Maybe she'll end up like Sextons and we'll take her away. I'm not entirely sure. But this doll, Igla, comes and has the objective of taking Helena away. And of course, Kalina doesn't want that, and she tries to use her bureaucratic powers to stop her. This doesn't go too well, and just when Gerard is about to take Helena away, Defy stops in. Now, it's worth noting that before this, at the very beginning of part one, there is a section in which we are reintroduced, or for new players, introduced to Alva, AN94, and Voimastina, AK-15, as they raid a Paradeus underground facility in order to extract data, I believe it was. And there we meet another one of our wonderful villains. And by wonderful, in this case, I mean she sucks. We meet Chiloveg, who is a Nido researcher. And I will have stuff to say about her later. I think she's a good antagonist in the sense that I don't like her and I want her dead and I want her plans to fail. But at the same time, she's pretty annoying. Um, Kind of a predictable type of character. Nothing that she's done so far has really interested me, which is saying something because even a character like Igla, who is very much this honorable, knightly character, I feel like at least Igla was able to interest me a little bit more later on. And I guess it does help that she does have a little more screen time than Chiloveg has. But what's important right now is when Alva and Voimastina, I also want to apologize. I might use Voimastina and 15 interchangeably. Sometimes it's just kind of a pain in the ass to say Voimastina all the time. But once those two infiltrate the base, Sheila Vague kills herself. She bites some pill in her mouth or whatever and dies. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of odd. how they made this sprite for this character that just dies immediately. Whatever, I don't know the priorities that Mika has. I guess the budget is just going to be that high for this event. Boy, how naive I was. But anyways, getting back to the interrupted trade that was going on. Defy shows up, realizes that, oh shit, Gerard is about to take Helena. We can't have that. And takes Helena away on their own. And then they start to flee the scene. And while Alpha is the one who's carrying Helena's box or whatever, that container that she's in, Voimastina stays behind to fight Igla, who has started chasing them. And then we have this moment that I'm a little mixed on. Because on one hand, it is so fucking cool. But on the other hand, it makes me think a little bit about Girls Frontline power scaling. But I'll get to that. So in this moment, Voimastina's standing in the middle of the street. She just dispatched some goons, some thugs, and she feels a presence staring at her from somewhere. And she looks around and uses her wolf's eye or whatever. And then over a kilometer away, standing on top of some rooftop, is Igla, and she's staring right back at her. And then she takes this, I think it was a spear, and throws it across all that distance, perfectly nailing Voimastina. I mean, Voimastina catches it, and it makes her slide backwards, grinding up the concrete and shit. Like some serious anime shit going on. And on one hand, it is so fucking cool. I really like that stuff. But on the other hand, are you telling me that these dolls can throw these big spears over a kilometer? Like, I mean, if that's the power we're talking about, that's the power we're talking about. But I don't want to jump the shark. You know what I'm saying? But regardless, that did act as a pretty good introduction to Igla and her power, and the fact that she is as strong or stronger than the most powerful doll in the Neo Soviet Union, AK-15, the badass. And this is confirmed even more later. Yeah, after the two run around more, there is a actual battle between Igla and AK-15, and we get this cool cutscene where they're throwing each other around and shit, doing all this crazy stuff. Feels like some Dragon Ball shit going on. It's a close fight, and only because of Alva's interference at the end of the cutscene are the two able to get away and get into the sewer system where they're still being chased. At this point, there is a decision that has to be made because they are in a sewer system that Girard knows all of the routes of. They are going to get found out eventually, and someone might have to stick behind to distract Igla while the other gets away to bring Helena to safety. There's actually an interesting moment where Voimastina brings up the idea that, well, if we can't guarantee that we can bring Helena to safety, and the failing condition here is that she is put into Girard's hands. We can't let that happen. But at the same time, if we can't protect her, the only other option might just be to eliminate her. In that case, no one gets her. There is no trouble. If Helena does not exist, then no one can use her for the wrong purposes. Which, of course, Alva immediately shuts down, citing Angie saving Anna in the first game. If you know, you know. We'll be talking about Angie more in a little bit, trust me. But I did think it was at least interesting to bring that up as far as both Voimastina's character and Alva's interaction with her. The fact that Voimastina knew that Alva was going to shut it down, but she still at least wanted to bring up the idea, let it be known that it was an option. So at this point, the idea is back to someone staying behind. Of course, Voimastina wants to volunteer. She's the fighter. She's already dealt a little bit with Igla and might be able to hold her off for longer. But instead, Alva says, no, I'll do it. And that's what happens. Now, of course, during a lot of this, we are cutting back and forth between points of view. And at some point, we are in the commander's point of view. and we get a helicopter visit from the one and only Kruger, who I was very happy to not only see, but specifically hear from. We did hear a little bit of his voice beforehand, I believe in Deep Oblivion. I think we heard him a little bit over the radio, but one of my suspicions was confirmed. His voice actor is Kenjiro Suda, who is a Japanese voice actor I really like, and you have probably heard of before. Very distinct voice, but I don't know. It was an interesting choice. At first, I wasn't 100% sure because I feel like if that voice was used in the first game, it wouldn't have fit. Kruger's old design, not that it's changed a whole bunch. I mean, it has, but I'll get to that. But how he looked in the first game, being all super muscular and awesome and all that, just how he looked. I feel like that voice wouldn't have fit him as much then, but now this version of him 10 years later, older, and he's still a huge man, but his age is definitely starting to show. I feel like that voice fits him a lot more now, and it adds a weird amount of character to him in a way that I find a little hard to describe. It's definitely a vibes thing. Don't mind me too much about that. I don't know. But anyways, he comes to the Elmo in a awesome helicopter and is just checking in on the commander. It's been a long time since they've seen each other. And an interesting thing about this interaction is just while Kruger does mention the importance of the commander, I think he says something along the lines of one of the most important thing we lost 10 years ago was you, the commander. And despite saying that, it doesn't feel like he is just sucking off the commander's dick. You know what I'm saying? Like every other character does. There's so much more of a mutual respect, even if the commander sometimes questions Kruger's decisions. And essentially, Kruger is there to say, come on over to Lviv. Here's this all access card that'll get you anywhere past any security you need to go to. Just come on in. And that's essentially what happens for a second, at least. The commander comes on in and gets his fancy hotel until he receives a call from Springfield, who is the one who brought Helena in for the transfer to Kalina, and receives the news that during that transfer, there was this, I think it was a gas that got released and triggered some of Kalina's old radiation sickness symptoms. And she's in the hospital. And of course, the commander, hearing that Kalina's in the hospital again, freaks out and is like, okay, let's go see her. Check in on her. And it's at this moment at the hospital that we get to see some vulnerability from Kalina that we know she's wanted to express in some way or another, but she's had this persona, this facade on for so long. And she just admits that no matter how decent she is at her role, she hates it. She doesn't like being a bureaucrat. She just wants to count ammunition and help the commander again, like the old days in Griffin and Kruger. That combined with the sprite that they have in this, where she's in her hospital gown and not in her suit. They even say in the text she looks younger without the suit. And it was something that I realized just looking at the sprite. I was like, damn, she really looks like she used to back in the day. Back in the day, both in the story and from the player's perspective in the first game, there was it was very effective in that sense. You really feel like you're on the same page with the commander, if you're someone who's stuck around with the series for a long time. And I like that a lot. Very touching moment. But anyways, after being told that she'd like to be alone for a moment, head back out and meet up with Kruger, and he has a task for us. Apparently there's going to be this summit or this conference, and there is going to be a Girard researcher by the name of Orphelune Girard. I'm just going to call her Orphe because saying that name is also a pain in the ass. But Orphe is there, and she is going to be giving a speech about Project Eden, which I haven't brought up yet. But essentially, this is the big the big plan, the big project that Helena is supposedly going to be used for. And it is the big thing that we're trying to stop. Very bad, very bad. Everyone might die. Boojums everywhere. Don't want that, right? So it is now our role to disguise as the press and try to get an interview with Orphe and essentially dig up as much as we can about Project Eden, see how involved she is, how much she knows. And that brings us to said conference. We bring Groza and Colfina along, and we kind of just play the role as press until we coincidentally meet Orphe and then learn that Igla is her personal bodyguard. It's even more than that. It is as much as Igla is her personal bodyguard, it is a much deeper connection. Later on, it really makes it seem that Orphe saved Igla from some sort of fate. There was some wording about some furnace or something. So I don't know if she was going to get scrapped and then Orphe saved her or something like that. I'm sure we'll learn very soon. But what's important to know is that Igla is extremely protective of Orphe for whatever reason, besides the programming and the orders that she was given. We, as the commander, essentially just try to get into her good graces, show some genuine interest in her research, which Orphe has always just been seen as the genius, the young genius. And I do want to give props to Mika for making her a young genius, and that meaning she is like university age and not a literal child. Thank you, Mika. I really appreciate that. I know it took a lot of restraint, but round of applause for that. The press that she's so used to talking to ask such surface level questions and aren't really interested in the intricacies of her work. So when the commander shows not only interest but some understanding in Project Eden's intricacies, collapse of epitheliums and whatnot, Orphe is excited to talk to us more later on. Orphe does her presentation during the conference, and that's all whatever. But afterwards, there is a special press conference where journalists and the press can ask pressing questions to Orphe in a private setting. We technically don't have access to this, but before the conference, we were snuck a access card to that event by a Gerard insider who I can only assume is AK-12. I might be really dumb right here, but I'm assuming that the insider that is hinted at throughout this is her. It's kind of what she's done before, so I wouldn't be surprised. But regardless, we go to the press thing and ask some questions and some real questions, not like the stupid questions that all the other press are asking. And we set up a meeting with Orphe at her lab later on. Meanwhile, and we might be getting a little off the continuity here at some points, I don't know. Um, there's a research lab underground somewhere, and it is being conducted by guess who? Chiloveg, who apparently has the ability to pretty much just reincarnate. And by that, I mean when she dies, which she does die multiple times, a clone of her just pops out, good as new, all the same memories, all that stuff. Not really sure how it works, but I mean, this is the series where neural clouds pretty much do the same thing. Um, just with the exception of backups and whatnot. But what's important about this research base is that in the sewer, when Alva stayed behind to allow Voimacina and Helena to escape, Alva was captured by Igla and brought to this facility pretty much for Chiloveg to crack her open, see what's inside of that neural cloud of hers. And so begins what I would like to call Why I Hate Chiloveg, also known as the Alva Torture Corner. Alva gets tortured a lot in this event. It is, by the end, it's almost a little overdone, a little dragged out, but I'll get to why it still works. Essentially, she is put into her brain, rolled noggin, and fed these horrible, extremely realistic nightmares where she is helpless and being torn apart by Elid monsters. Until And I have a little notes thing here that I'm looking at for each little segment I want to cover. And in all caps with like 10 exclamation points at the end is Angie. I would scream a lot louder, but I don't really have the ability to right now. Angie's back, kind of, not really, not at all when you think about it. But in this flashback, not flashback, sorry, in this drug trip sequence, this torture nightmare that Alpha is going through, we do get to see Angie, a very nice looking new sprite. I, I'll admit it. I'll admit it. When I saw this, I was pointing at my screen, soy jacking a little bit. I was like that one guy watching the fucking Star Wars trailer, sobbing. Okay, I didn't cry, but you get my point. I was pretty hyped up as someone who became very attached to Angie in the first game, and as someone who didn't really accept what happened. I didn't really process it. Um, this event helped with that in a sense. Uh, I'll get to why that specifically in a second, but we do get to see Angie, and she helps. She helps out, and she's working together with Alva. You know, I'll call her 94 during this segment just for um, nostalgia's sake. She's helping out 94 and giving her orders, and then I also have on my notes right next to where it says Angie with all the exclamation points in parentheses. It says and that bitch RPK because RPK also shows up. I I'm not extremely active in the Girls Frontline community. I'll admit that. But at the same time, I peruse my social media enough to where I'm surprised that I didn't get spoiled for these reveals. Because I remember seeing RPK like a fan made thing that was using Alva's sprite. It must have been just when Deep Oblivion had come out in China or whatever. I remember seeing that, but I don't remember seeing this official redone sprite and seeing seeing this bitch, dude. I was so pissed, but at the same time, they both look great. They both look great. RPK shows up and helps out the two, and 94 gets shoved on a train and it gets sent away. And during this train section is actually more interesting stuff because on this train, who is there but Voimastina? And there's something very interesting here. A couple things that I liked. First of all, was Voimastina's voice actress. I so far we haven't heard that voice get emotional, right? It's very much been cold and tactical, I guess. Very small hints of emotion. But seeing it get so angry and yell so much and have so much hatred in it, it was genuinely intimidating from a fictional anime character. I thought that was pretty cool. Not only that, but in the same scene, to set the scene, it describes Voimastina sitting there with, I think it's like an anti material rifle. And it describes how she has been relying on this rifle to make up for some of the strength that she doesn't have. You know, despite being the strongest doll in the Neo-Soviet Union, she needs a little bit more nowadays, which does, I think, set up how she has a fucking Gundam, or I guess it's more of an armored core later on. I'm very excited to get to that, by the way. I think that although AK-15 is the doll who needs it the least, I think it's still cool. It's still cool. I'll admit it. But regardless, in this scene, it turns out it's all been a reflection of Alva's insecurities and doubts about herself. The Voimastina that's yelling at her transforms into herself, and it's all this thing, right? And during a lot of this, she's being taken in and out of consciousness and having to fight these demons and then kind of winning against them. And then she wakes up and it's like Shilove goes on some stupid fucking speech and Igla shows up for a second and does whatever and shoots Shilove in the fucking head and Shilove comes back. I'll admit I'm getting a little tired of recapping the story at this point, so I might kind of speed run some of this. But that whole Alva torture thing, kind of in her head, it does give us a lot, I think, especially those who did play the first game, but also those who didn't. I think it, I don't really know anyone. I haven't been able to speak to anyone who has only played the second game. I don't know if this seems weird. All these random names and characters showing up. Like, who the fuck is RPK? Who is AK-12? Who is Angie? But seeing a lot of those faces again, it's nice. And Alva's internal struggle about wondering, you know, the the phrase, "What am I fighting for?" She has this concept of what Angie's goals were, and she's been living for what she thought that ideal was, and going after that ideal because she wants to continue Angie's legacy and her goals. But then she has to question herself, who what really were those goals? Are the goals that I'm going after really the same thing? Alva starts to have this moment of nothing ever happens. Despite all that her and Voimistina have done, all the bases they've destroyed, all of the Paradise they've eradicated, they're still around. In the end, despite all that they've done, they haven't really done anything. There is a big theme of futility in this event and in, I guess, Girls Frontline Two's story in general, where despite all that the commander had done in the first game, Paradise is still around. They're still fucking shit up, doing terrible experiments and ruining lives and all that. And even earlier on, I have the line pulled up right here during the Kalina hospital visit scene. There's a quote where she says, "Justice, fairness, freedom, it's all fake. The corporations just get bigger and nobody cares about the people outside the walls." And in the scene that I'm talking about with Alva, there's this idea that it's all just too big. It's too much. You can't do anything. And I think, I don't mean to relate the waifu game to real life too much, but it is a theme that you hear a lot with people when they wonder what they're supposed to do about injustice and the horrors that we witness every day, and the fact that just no one's doing anything about it. I think that despite that theme of futility, the way that Alva, near the end of this self realization, starts to realize that she just needs to keep going. She just needs to keep trying. And the fact that that's what the commander has always done, that's what Angelia had always done, just kept going. Near the end of the Alva mind trip, there's a part in which she talks to another inner version, her idealized memory version of Angelia. And there's a couple things to mention here. First of all, the sprite that they gave Angie is just, I'm gonna put it on screen right now. Oh man, that smile, dude. I don't I don't get too happy about little things like this, but they did such a good job. She really looks so pretty here. Um, anyways, enough of my simping. During this scene, Angie pretty much just recommends that Elva keeps doing good. Just keep doing good. That's all you really need to do. Just do your best. And that's real as fuck. That's real as fuck, dude. Um, I liked that a lot. I like that conversation that they had. I understand that this isn't the real Angie. This is the memory version, and everything that Alva's been seeing is the memory version of whoever. But it's still so meaningful to Alva and to me, the reader as well. Besides just being a nice little moral lesson to take away, um, seeing Angie for the last time like that really put a nice cap on things for me personally. Good shit. While this is going on, there's all sorts of stuff where the commander is going to interview Orphe at the lab, and all that happens, and there's some fun hijinks where Orphe gets to be silly and fuck up coffee. Um, some fun Igla stuff. I don't really have too much to say about that. The place gets attacked, all that, blah 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 blah. Um, I think the main takeaway from most of this last part, I think you'll all agree with me on this, is fuck Chilaveg. I fucking hate Chilaveg. That bitch can die a million times, actually, for all I care. Terrible, terrible. Hate her. All that happens after this is Alva attempts to escape with the help of Voimastina and gets stopped by Igla. And Igla and Voimastina fight a bit, and Alpha shows up and helps. And while that's all happening, of course, Helena, who was left behind for just a moment by Voimastina, is captured by Chiloveg. And I can only imagine what horrible things are going to happen. And really, I don't want to know. But we will in a couple weeks when part two comes out. So, yippee. Only other real thing I wanted to bring up was some of the artwork, especially the background artwork in this event. A lot of good shit here. Um, a lot of the backgrounds, especially in Lviv, show these beautiful blue skies with these nice clouds and these tall towers, and it really does make it feel like a utopia, um, a very nice city, to be sure. A city that will probably be turned into Elid in part two, I'm sure. Um, Besides that, there were actually a couple of other backgrounds. Specifically, I wanted to mention there is the Gerard HQ, which I wanted to point out because it reminds me a lot of Arasaka HQ from Cyberpunk, where there's that giant screen in the middle, and there's like these two hallways that kind of go back from there on each side. I thought that was interesting. I'm wondering if they pulled some inspiration from there. And then there's this other thing that I noticed right when you enter the hospital. It's like the hospital lobby. There's in the background this one decal that says like decal machine on it. I was like, huh, I wonder if that's a placeholder. So then I looked up decal machine. It is literally the logo of some Blender add-on or something. I thought that was kind of funny. Um, Besides that, I think it's about time that we enter the most important part of today's show, as always, which is the side character tier list. All right, we're back on the tier list now. Um, Last time we had Fedya and Pavel in A and Truxon in C. So today I decided that since Zimmerman does appear in this event, I will include him. And we have Chiloveg, we have Igla, and we have Orphe. You might notice a slight difference in the tier list here. There is an extra tier, so we're gonna get that out of the way. Chiloveg goes in Chiloveg tier. Fuck this bitch. Hater. That's that. Annoying, stupid, hater. Uh, Next, Zimmerman. I haven't had too much of a chance to talk about him, how he existed in Deep Oblivion. I think he's an alright character. I'm gonna put him in B and I'll explain myself. Obviously, I didn't trust him during Deep Oblivion, despite the awkward, relatable guy he seemed to be. He's a politician, you know. You can't really trust him. Um, I think he's a decent antagonistic force. Um, he almost fooled me, I'll admit. I guess I didn't really have my guard up at the time, but yeah, I guess I didn't expect him to be this big of a player, even though it seems like even he at this point has bigger dogs to answer to. I'd say B for now. Might go down or up or I don't know. He's kind of whatever. Igla, I don't know. Actually, Igla really could go in A or B. I think she's really cool as a character. I like her conviction. Um, I'd say B above Zimmerman. This might change. This really might change. And Orphe, I like Orphe, not just because she's cute, which she is cute, but she's fun. I I wasn't super into the oh, what's the term? Hime Dere uh persona at first, but it's definitely not as annoying and tropey as the type of character that Chiloveg is. Chiloveg catching strays over here, but I hope it's not a stray next time. I hope that the round just fucking lodges into her head again a million times. So as of right now, this is where everyone sits. Thank you, tier list me. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Intermediate Fan Reviews. Thank you for watching. Seems like it's going to be quite the long episode. I did want to give an extra thank you for the reception on the first episode, especially on the old Instagram account. It's not very often where what you actually put the most effort into is the most well received. It's usually the other way around. The lowest effort thing seems to get the most attention and vice versa. So I'm very happy that the first episode did as well as it did. I guess we'll see if this does that too or not or whatever. Either way, I'm having fun making these, so I hope you're having fun watching them. I'll see you in the next one. Later.